Hey, just wanted to document another range session that I had today, which was really good, related to my driver. And so, I posted a video where I said that I took my driver out of my bag and I've been experimenting with a 0 iron and a 1 iron. So I have a 1 iron from an older TaylorMade U series, and I got the latest one bent down, 2 or 3 degrees. I asked for it to be 2 degrees, but then I went to Golf Galaxy and they said that it was bent down 3 degrees. So it may actually be 13 degrees now. And then so I tested those two up against each other and then noticed not that much of a difference. And so if there were bigger differences, I may actually have considered using that as my driver. So that actually sort of motivated me to give the driver another chance, on the driving range and figure it out today, which is what I did. And, I had a great session, and so that's what I want to just record the feels. But, again, it's largely motivated by the fact that I didn't notice an appreciable distance difference between my 0 iron and 1 iron. And so the next thing I want to do is actually compare my 1 iron with my 2 iron, which is a TaylorMade 2 iron UDI that's 18 degrees. And I don't even know if there'll be that much difference there. And so if there isn't really, I may actually consider pulling out my 1 iron at some point and just going with my 2 iron, because I love the 2 iron and it's just very, very reliable for me. But I'm hoping that I can still with some of these swing concepts that work today with my driver, implement those with my long irons and really all my clubs, and then get a little bit more consistency first and foremost, and then distance. So that's the next thing. But as of now, I'm in need of something to be a little bit longer than what I can get with my 1 iron, which on average was about 250 yards, which is good and works for most courses if I'm playing from the up tees. But if I ever want to play a more challenging course or just these longer courses from the back tees, then I need something a bit more than that, and so if my 1 iron was 275, for example, consistently with roll 250 in the air, then I wouldn't be as hungry for something a little bit longer, because then it would be sort of like splitting hairs. Whether my driver's 275 to 300 wouldn't be that big of a deal, but the difference between 250 and 275 is actually quite a bit. And so on the course, and so especially when the par fours are longer on the harder courses, and then getting to some par fives, so and then the force carries that happen quite often. So it's may not seem like a big deal to people, but it was, and it is to me. So but it was good. It actually motivated me to take only my driver to the driving range today. And so I hit a full bucket, I would say pretty poorly, and then I was just just kind of like tinkering, and then just figuring out which are the things that are the most important for my driver swing to be most effective. And then it's an iterative process. And then I found out, what it is. And this was the amazing thing, that all the things that I was thinking were correct, but it's prioritizing what's the most important. And the most important thing that I've realized that I actually have control over, which is the most important thing, because there's a lot of things that I should be doing that I just don't know how to control, over the ball or in the swing, is keeping my head back. And so first and foremost, starting with it back. So having the spine tilt. And then the idea is that I have to hang on to that for dear life and just do not alter that at all. And so once that happens, the nice thing about it is that it basically locks the upper body in a rotational position, which is good. And then what it does is it separates the upper and the lower body. And so when I do open my hips, it's still happening with the head back. And so it allows me to stay behind the ball, but the hips are still need to open to shallow the club head, to deliver, the proper angle of attack. So that's crucial. So when I was doing different things, I was doing that starting with the head back, and then through the swing, I was maybe changing its position, and then I'll explain what I did to fix that part. But first and foremost, I realized with the driver, for me, and I have a feeling this is the same for everybody, all good players have their head back, and some even move it back even more to try and get the ball up even higher. So that's crucial. So it has to stay in its position or move back, behind the ball. And so to get extra height. And so that's undeniable. And so all the swings that are good, I'm doing that, and then I was actually getting the ball up in the air, which was my main issue. I was hitting a lot of like low ropey kind of duck hooks when the head was not staying back, to impact. So, and beyond. And so the driver has to feel very like long, like the club has to be out through the ball, being released, the energy out through the ball. And so the only way to do that is, again, to keep the head back so the energy is not going down towards the ball. So that's an absolute must. And so no matter what, for me or for anybody, that's an absolute mandatory rule. And so for a consistent strike. So now the next thing that I've realized, it's actually fairly simple. There's 3 key things that I need to remember. So first one, spine angle with the head staying back, and then lock it there. And then if I am going to move it, it has to go back a bit. Definitely not up and definitely not forward. Okay, so it can go down and back, but preferably just back. Don't want it to go down to change the physics. So, and that also relates to my setup. I want to stand a little bit closer and feel like I'm a bit taller, over the ball. It'll promote a cut, and then it'll promote me not like getting too down, which is what I tend to do. My knees tend to get too flexed. And the problem with that is that if they're too flexed, then there's a natural tendency when we get nervous or something, we want to jump up. So I don't want my knees too flexed, basically. So I have to stand a little bit closer and just trust that feel, even if it may feel a bit foreign to me, like I'm standing too close, which I'm not. So set up, do that tilt of the spine, hold the head there. And now there's things, well, what could cause that head to move? And so I think of the swing more as like time to the ball than like width and depth and distance. So what's going to help me create more time for the club head to reach the ball, which effectively is the same as depth. One of them is depth. And so all I'm thinking on my backswing is get into my left hip. I'm left-handed, so get into it. And then if I'm into my left hip, then it's very likely my shoulders are deep, at least as deep as my hips, obviously. So, and then I actually almost want to feel like my back is facing the target. And so this is the analogy that I was thinking, or a picture, is to like turn and load up and feel like I'm taking a picture of the target with my back, as if there was a camera on my back. And so I'm loading up, feeling like a snap, flash of the camera, and then I can start my downswing. So that's important. So getting into the left hip, taking a picture with my back to the target, of the target, and then the next key thing is getting into my right hip, clearing it. And so this is what Mike Malaska teaches, and I was watching recently, and this helps, is that the hip are not rotating, they're just linear forces. So my left hip is going in, and then my right hip is clearing and getting out of the way. And so they're moving like this. Okay, just get into the left one and then get into the right one. That's it. And the only thing that could mess that up at that point is if my arms get too fast. And so then it's like a tempo thing where I have to trust that my arms cannot be too quick to not allow my right hip, for example, to clear. And so if my arms do move too quickly, then the lower body is not activated and able to allow the club to shallow out. So it's just going to come in steep. And so that's the important part. And so I can swing my arms as quote unquote fast as I want, as long as my right hip is clearing first. Then my arms can come through with a shallow club head. So, but what I've noticed for me, and this applies to my irons as well, is that slower is better, and then I'm not losing distance or anything like that. That's the thing, is that I got to realize, especially with my longer clubs, that swinging my arms violently is not going to produce like extra far shots or whatever. So that's actually what I noticed with my 1 iron and 0 iron loft change, is that the lofts don't really do that much. To get more distance, I have to go to a longer club. Obviously, if I kept dropping the lofts down, I could potentially get more, and then I have to swing it faster and faster because I have an extra stiff shaft. But there's a bit of diminishing return, is what I'm trying to say, with strictly just the angle of the club head. You have to generate more speed with that club head, and one way to do that is if you have a longer club, like a driver. It's much longer. And so, again, I was getting about 10 or 15 yards more with my 0 iron, but it wasn't impressive enough for me to change it out. And then I prefer my older club because the club head feels lighter and I'm just more used to it, and I can hit it off the ground. So I get like a 2-for-1. So I'm not going to game the 0 iron, but it was a good experiment, a good thing for me to validate. But all is to say is that there is a limit, to like how far a ball can go. And it's predicated on not just the loft of the club, but the length of the club, and then all those kind of things. And so swinging it harder per se doesn't actually benefit you, because first and foremost, the angle of attack is the most important thing in order to get something out of the club, and so definitely with the driver, staying back and hitting up on it, you need that, or else you're not even going to hit reliable shots at all. So distance will not be an issue. So that's what I need to convince myself, and I did. And I went back, and then I got a small bucket, and then I basically reprioritized those things. And so I said, no matter what, keep the head back, do a left hip, right hip thought, and that's it. That's my only goal when I'm swinging. And I don't really have to think about the backswing one because I just do it naturally now more often. But I do have to think of the right hip clearing, because the arms are very tempted to just dominate, the downswing. So I have to really think about it. And so that's why that picture analogy of the camera taking a picture of the target helps, because that's my trigger to start really, really clearing the right side. And so, and then don't rush the hands. It's not like it's fine. Like, as long as I hit the center of the club face with the club, moving upwards, then, I get plenty of distance, and I was hitting them fairly high. So, which is what I want. And so that was the key, that was the major thing that produced a lot of, then I started hitting good shots back to back to back to back. So that validated that that's what has been affecting my driver, is that I tend to just go back to a very much like a downward, very little lower body, and then the head centered, and then moving down towards the ball, instead of starting back and then staying back and then maybe even going further back. So that really was it, and then I have to really feel like I'm kind of like launching it, and catapulting it up. And so it really helps me stay and focus on the fact that I really want to stay behind, not just up until impact, but even beyond, well beyond impact, and really feel like that club is getting long, and then it's going to increase the consistency of it as well. So that was, it was great. It was just a really, really good feeling, because I understood the issue now. I was ready to give up on my driver completely, literally, like trade it in or not have it in the bag. But, it's good, and so pretty much every club, the way I view it, like, has to be statistically more reliable as you get lower and lower. And so I don't expect my driver to be as reliable as my 1 iron, because I'm hitting it pretty consistently now, but it has to be decent. Like, if I have 10 balls, I have to be able to hit like 5 really good, or something like that, and then 3 playable, and then 2 squirrely. That's okay. But before, it was like I was struggling to even hit 1 out of 10, when I wasn't implementing these concepts. So I think now, like, with these concepts, if you give me 10 balls with my driver, I'll definitely hit 5 that I'm happy about. And so the nice thing about it too is my driver's 9 degrees, and I have an extra stiff shaft, so I have to swing it a little bit harder. And so it does actually give me a huge distance, improvement. than my one iron. And so again, if I smoke my one iron and then the conditions are good with roll and stuff, like I can get it out there, but 275, sometimes a little bit more, but those are rare, one-off situations where that should be a stock driver, for me. And then if I get at that one, it gets even more, like 300 and beyond. So it's worth it, the trouble of like figuring it out. And so, it's good. I guess I think that's pretty much the key for me is just, and again, also a very, very deep interlock. I want to really, again, not get back to this very like strong, excessively, it's still very, very strong. Even when my grip is quote unquote weak, it's still incredibly strong. But when I feel a very, very deep interlock in my hands, it just feels like the club is a little bit more free and I'm not as tight. So I don't think it matters whether I choke up on it. I was experimenting with that for a while. I don't think that makes a big difference with the driver. It's like, obviously I can, play around with that a little bit, but the quality of the shot, first and foremost, it will never be good no matter what I do, choking up or not, if my head does not stay back the whole time. It just will never be good. And, there's something to be said actually for not choking up because, sometimes when I'm choked up, I may have a tendency to swing a little bit faster because I feel like the club is shorter. I get away with it. But when it's longer, it sort of reminds me to just trust the arc, of the club to do all the work. And so, that was my big, understanding today that, I want to document. And so, it looks like everything is good. And I want to apply this understanding now to all my other clubs, all my irons, because it's the missing elements. It's like maybe with my irons, of course, my head is not staying back, but wherever it starts, it stays centered. And then I need a very, very deep turn, and then get really, really into my left hip. And I normally in the past, I don't even do it at all. So anything is going to be better. And so it doesn't have to be like absolutely outrageously deep, but again, it's a timing thing. The deeper I get into that, it gives the club more time to get to the ball. And so it can actually not fix totally, but if you get a little bit quick, it helps you because then it'll slow you down a little bit by the club shallowing first, once you change direction and get into your right hip deeper. So if you're getting deep into your left hip, then you got to undo that to get into the right hip. So it adds, it effectively gives your club more time to square up. And so and obviously with the shoulders as well, the deeper that I get into my shoulders, the less I have to, generate power with my arms, which there is no ability to generate power really with your arms and stuff. It's pretty much too late at that point. So again, you can get away with good hand action to, preserve angles and stuff, no doubt. But swinging your arms really fast, what I realize now doesn't even make sense to even think about that. It's like your brain automatically does that, as long as you do the other things correctly. And so there's actually a fairly narrow window of tempo that I want to operate in, where as long as I don't go outside of that, then this hip motion will happen fairly naturally. And so as long as I don't screw it up, with a very, very quick transition or, desire to get the swing over with, sometimes is the issue. It's not even that I'm trying to hit it very far, it's just I'm trying to get the swing over with. That's just like the way our brain works, because we're giving it a task and it just wants to get it over with. But, patience is definitely rewarded, especially with the longer and longer clubs. But these are basically my key thoughts. Really, now I realize it boils down to that relatively simple thing, is keep the head position at setup what it is. And for the irons, it can go down slightly, because you're trying to trap the ball. That's okay. Never forward and never up. Okay. So these directions, it can never go. These ones, it can go, down and back. And so that's acceptable. Again, you don't want to do it with the driver like down, but maybe a little bit, but more back. And so never forward and up. And so usually up is when my arms are swinging too fast and I didn't have time for my hips to clear. So I come out of the shot. And so usually it's just like the arms are swinging too quickly, transitions happening too fast, which could also be caused by just not going deep enough. So it's not that my arms are moving fast, it's just they started at it. They were given a head start, so to speak. They weren't far enough back to allow the club to have more time to reach the ball. So more and more depth in the hips and the shoulders will help, just in general, to get timing better and all that kind of stuff. I'll be less prone to rushing the downswing. So that's really it, and it's actually fairly simple. And then I want to make sure on all these shots now that I finish in a proper pose, because then that means that I'm not, I'm engaging all these different things, and the energy is more rotational than, stabbing at the ball. So that's the keys. So keep the head position fixed. Fairly deliberate, backswing. Really feel like my back is almost facing the target, which feels like I'm getting off the ball, but I'm not, because my head is staying where it's supposed to be. Everything else is supposed to rotate freely. That's not adding any risk. It's actually reducing the amount of risk and variability in my swing. I have to believe that is really, really feel like the more that I crank and rotate, it's going to create less variability in the club face. And so I need to understand that. And then, so again, that's activating the left hip deep. And then the focus at the top of the swing really should just be, slow arms, obviously, and then clear the right hip. And then the head cannot move, ever. And so that's hard to control. But usually if, the arms aren't moving too fast, then the head doesn't need to move because the body's rotating. And so usually when the head moves, it's just that I'm coming with this shoulder quick with the arms. And so the head is dropping towards the ball. And so I don't have my rotational force anymore. I have more of a to the ball energy. And then it's not hitting up on the ball, which is what I need. So again, if I sort of feel this tilt at the beginning and then feel like I'm really at all costs preserving that sort of sets me off into a good position where even if my backswing is a little bit squirrely and not perfect, then, I know when that club comes down, my head can't move. So my hips gotta do the rest, get me to the ball. And, they have to go faster. And so to compensate. But, I was hitting quite a few good in a row. And so, the driver's definitely back in the bag now. And then, it's definitely an important tool for me to have and hit reliably. And really for me, golf is more fun, when you are hitting your driver well and, you can trust it. And, it opens up a lot of scoring opportunities now that my long irons, again, because of these concepts, are more reliable. And then I want to be able to start hitting my long irons. I've been hitting my 1-iron pretty good off the ground. So even if I don't use that very often, which is effectively my 3-wood, my 2-iron could start allowing me to get to some of these par 5s, in 2. Because like if my driver is good, I can definitely get it out to 300 with roll because I hit a lower sort of medium thing. And then my 2-iron, if I get it, it's like 250. So I can reach a lot of like 5 and 50-yard par 5. So that's a big deal. And then all the par 4s get progressively shorter with my driver being reliable. So I just have to trust it, and obviously like getting deeper, I always thought my issue was that I have a short backswing and all that, which there's some truth to that. But really the main issue I realize now is just my head is not staying, back and fixed. And so it doesn't matter how long or short your swing is. If you don't do that, it's never going to work. So that's the absolute must, the pillar of the swing. And so that's a setup issue. And then all the other things are ultimately, you have to preserve that. And so anything that violates that head position, staying back or moving back, like I said, is going to be causing problems, and I can't do that. So that's the key. Just keep the head back, get full backswing, get into the left hip, and then only focus on clearing the right hip, maintaining the head position. And then, just swinging through the ball. That gave me a lot of success.